We're back for day 2 of the boot making. So what I have here is the boot. It's been sitting outside for several days and it's been drying. And what I'm doing right now isn't really part of the boot making process. But because I want to be able to nail at this kind of level, I don't want a really long bar holding it up. So what I'm doing, I'm just kind of rolling the boot down back onto itself so that when I put it on the stand, it won't be hanging onto the last. And I realize there's still a little bit of rubber in that has to come out. There we go. And so now it can sit. The first thing I really want to do is use some sort of a marking tool. I don't want to use a pen, but something that kind of just makes an impression. And I want to scratch a line where the two parts overlap, so that I can see that and I can glue it. All right, I'm in a pretty good space there. And what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to get in and I'm going to pull out a couple of nails. What I really need is my nail puller. And I'm using a screwdriver here, but I'm going to go looking for something and I'll come right back. All right, so I have the nail puller, which is nothing but a screwdriver that I put a little notch in. And I do that, I kind of try to get on each side of it and pull it. And then I have sort of nippers that I can use to pull them out. But this first step, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull out the first couple of nails. Getting them out can be a little tricky. That's why I recommended last time that you don't nail them in all the way. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to peel it back. And that should allow me to see exactly where, because I made that scratch mark, exactly where it used to be. So now I'm going to get in there with some glue. I'm going to very carefully apply some glue. To both surfaces. This is barge cement, which is a great product for leather. One of the things I also realized, I have to get any nails that are under here out. Otherwise I'll glue the boot on in a way that I can't undo. That would have been bad. Okay. And I don't need a ton of glue on here, but I do need enough to get the parts to stick together. I don't want it dripping with glue. Enough is enough. And that's not a real specific term, but it really works. You know, just whatever gets into the fibers of the leather is enough. And anything more than that is just going to make it take longer for it to dry. Because this is a contact cement, which means it sticks to itself better than it sticks to other things. So it is really good at attaching leather to leather, but it's only works if it's dry. If you just put it on now and treated it like glue, you know, like an Elmer's glue or anything like that, it really wouldn't work. It would just kind of slip apart. So these sorts of things are definitely necessary to learn how to get the glue on. And it's also important to get the glue in the right places and allow it to dry. So one of the things we're going to do next is we're going to let this leather take its own time and dry. It'll take a few minutes. Okay, so I'm making sure, being really careful. I did get some on the wood here. That's not the end of the world. But I do want to make sure that I'm getting it everywhere along there and I'm getting it all the way to the edges here. This edge I see right here, I missed, so I'm going to come back and do my best. Put some on the edge. See how gloopy that was? That's way too much glue. I'll try to spread it around.
Uh-oh.
And you can also do that. That's bad. Don't do that. You can kind of brush it off some leather. So this particular leather is kind of plasticized, so it's not a problem if it happens that way. But if it does get on a natural leather, it really sticks, and you don't want that. So what I'm doing right now is I'm allowing the leather to dry, the glue to dry. I'll close it back up. While I'm doing that, I'm going to pull out some of the more of the nails, because they're not all necessary. I think these two would be really easy to take out, but I want them there because they're going to keep these parts from shifting around. So I'm going to pull out a few more nails. I'm not going to pull them all out, but it's going to help me get some of these parts undone. And by the way, you notice that this leather has taken on the shape of the wooden last, and that's really what we're looking for. Oh, wrong one. Now, this is not the best leather ever, but even upholstery leather that has been plasticized can be used to make footwear. What I'm going to find, I'm going to get these nails out. And I'm going to find some that are tucked down under here, because remember we were closing bubbles, and sometimes we closed leather on top of the bubbles. And that's all right. The other nail I need to make sure I take out is this one, and this one, because they're holding it to the wooden form, but I don't want to do that until I'm ready. So right now I want everything to stay in place. So I'm leaving those. Forgetting those can be a real problem, though. I have done that, and it becomes a massive pain in the butt to get it out. Okay. Notice this part is all detached, but yet it's still holding the shape. And it will loosen up a little bit once all the nails are out. But it holds most of the shape. Okay, so I said I was going to miss one. Must be under here. I feel it. Somewhere in there, there's another nail. Come on. There we go. So now, find them all. Get that one. Alright, so now this stuff pretty much has the shape, even though it's not attached anymore. If I push it down, it goes back down. I'm going to work on the toe a little bit more while this leather glue is drying a little bit. And I'm going to do my best to leave the nail set closest to the leather glue in, because that just is a technique that helps me make sure everything stays aligned. So I'm not taking this one or this one out, but everything else is going to come out. Put some of these in too tight. So you can, sometimes, if you're having trouble getting the tool under it, you can go around the other way, and you can go under the leather, and sometimes you can pull it up even if you can't get quite under the head of it. So that can work really well. Just kind of get under, from under the leather, and you can pull it. Just gives you a little more room to work. Okay, so getting there. I'm sure this makes for exciting video with watching the nails come out, but it is a necessary step. Sometimes if you can't get one out, you go to the one next to it, and that gives you a little more room to work. Now we're getting there. And by the time I get these out, that leather glue will be dry. And we want it to be tacky dry. We don't want to be days dry. If this type of glue gets over dried, waits a week between when you put the glue on and when you stick the pieces together, well, you can revitalize the glue by coming in and putting another thin coat of that glue on it. There's one hiding down here I'm going to have to get to from the bottom side. There it is. Go. And I think for this one, I'm going to have to come in around from the back side. A lot of these are tapped a little more tightly than I currently do. I used to put them in all in as far as they would go. I put them in tight, but I've learned it's just harder to get them apart. That one stupid nail not cooperating. Okay, everything else though is nice and even. All right, so now what I'm going to do, take this off the post very carefully. Unfold all this to try and get it sealed up nicely. Look at that. That worked really well. Okay, now I should be able to put it back on the post. I use my hands to really smooth the leather down everywhere. And that worked really well. Now I ought to be able to peel out the remaining couple of nails. That one. And that one. There should be 4 left, but I think I saw a 5th one hiding that I hadn't seen before. Yep. There's that one. There's that one, and then there's the one that was hiding, which is right back here, if I can get this one out. One last nail, I think. Oh, I ripped the nail right out. Okay, so same trick. You can go under your leather if you're having trouble pulling it. Okay, now I ought to be able to just pull it down carefully and peel it back. And I do this very gently to make sure I didn't miss any spots. And that worked. Okay, now what you ought to see is that this still holds the shape of the boot. It has all the shape that the boot would have had on the last, except the bottom is frilly. That's okay. That's what we're looking for. So I set it aside for a second. And I look at it and make sure I still just have the 3 nails. I don't see any other parts that are problematic. And I'm going to slip that right back over where we were. Okay. So then I can see on this, just based on the piece of leather, where the other one was. There's this weird stain right through the middle. So I can put glue everywhere here and get it. Now I'm noticing a bump here. I don't know what that bump is. It's just a splinter in the wood. Nothing to worry about. I can just kind of come in here, tap it down, make sure I didn't have anything. All right, so then I'm going to come in here now, carefully with the glue again. Scrape off as much excess as I can. And start spreading. Spreading the love and the toxic fumes, which are delightful. Okay, so once again, we're doing the exact same thing with the glue. don't be super liberal with it. Be conservative with the amount of glue you're using. Make sure that you're getting it applied evenly and to all the surfaces, but you don't have to have it glooping on. And I am using the map that I have of where the other piece was open to be able to look at it. So I'm going to take this piece off, set it down while it's drying, and I'm going to carefully look here. And you can see in here all the lines where it was attached before. So if I'm careful, I can put glue everywhere here, all the way around, and try to get it into the nooks and crannies, into the folds in the leather. You really want it to be there everywhere you need it to go. Okay, I'm getting there. And I just carefully peel it out. Turn it inside out. You can see the lines. It does make your life easier. I try not to be too exuberant about, turning it inside out, because it does, dull the edges a little bit of the sharp curls that you have, but I think it works really well to be able to see. And I'm just looking in here. I can see the lines very clearly where the glue was, or where the wood was, and that's where the glue is going. Almost there. So right now it's still a little bit wet, too wet to do anything with. So what I'm going to do, use this minute to carefully put this back on, and I'm going to then take to sewing the parts. So I'm going to have to move to the sewing machine. So now we're going to take a quick break. So the next step is to sew this seam. This glue is dried. This glue is pretty much dried. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to very carefully do this. You can hand sew it, but of course I have a machine to do that. So I'm not going to hand sew something that I could machine sew. With any luck, this will work. Right now, these first couple stitches will be a little problematic because I'm sewing through the glue that will eventually join at the uppers. So until I move past that, it just wants to stick to the machine. Now, this was the hardest part right here, because I had to get right over the arch where the overlap of the leather is the narrowest. But it went really well. I think we got good, clear stitches right through the spot where it's supposed to be. And now I've reached the point where the glue exists again. I probably shouldn't have put glue here. I ordinarily don't. Just skip this little spot, but hey, I wasn't thinking. It's been years since I made boots on a regular basis, so hey, I'm happy to have them working as well as they are. Just back stitching right now. And this sewing machine is a killer. This is a World War II era sewing machine. It's an Adler made in Germany. The same machine exists in America by Singer, and these are called patch machines because the head can turn 360 degrees and sew in any direction, and they are fabulous machines. So that's it. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to very carefully give myself a little bit of room, cut my thread if I can with the world's dullest scissors, trim off the stitches in the beginning, trim off the stitches at the end, and at this point the glue should be tacky enough to do it, and we'll move back to the other portions. Alright, so now I've got these 3 nails to contend with. I'm going to pull out the middle one, but I'm leaving the other 2 in. I'm going to carefully go to the back of the boot and try to line it up at the very center and touch it. Pull it all the way to the front and try to touch the center of it. Then I try to get here, just where the instep starts, touch it, and I'm pressing it into contact very lightly because I just want to be sure that all of my parts are lining up and I'm getting it square. Because I want it to be right. And I don't want it to do anything weird. So I'm just gently pulling my leather. And at this point now, I can apply some force. I'm just going to take the hammer. I'm going to support it with this hand. And now, this is actually one piece. Technically, you have a shoe at this point. It's only glued together, which is perhaps not ideal, although most modern shoes are only glued together. But the really important thing is you got to remember to take out these 2 nails. All right, so you got to get it out from under there. And my hammering it has really, really driven it in there. So that one is out. And this one is going to be a pain. So my other option is I can come up from the bottom, put it inside the boot, and try to pull. And I was able to just use my hand and pull this portion, and it pulled the nail out. Okay, so now, if I did this right, the only thing attaching this thing to it is the glue, and I think I could remove this. I'm going to do one more step before we make the soles. So I'm going to go away for a few seconds and I'll be right back. Now, I have a brand new razor blade, and I think it's important that they're brand new. These are single edge razor blades. And I'm just coming in and I'm very carefully cutting off anything that's not sitting flush. You want to be careful. You can cut yourself with this. It's super sharp. You don't really want to cut yourself with it. If you can help it, that's not fun. You shouldn't ask me how I know, because, well, I've done it. Okay. And you notice how uneven everything looks. That just doesn't matter. It's okay. So now it's all pretty smooth in terms of its surface area. And now I have to go through and do the same thing back here. And that's pretty good. I mean, I can come in if I want to do all of them and make them the same. I certainly can. That one could go. But you don't have to. I mean, some of them are just so little, it doesn't matter. You know, shoemaking is as much of an art as it is a science. You just kind of feel it. And it's not a real precise one. With the shape of this opening, it's totally different from what we would see on the mate to it. Just based on how the leather's stretched. And the leather stretches based on what piece of the cow it came from and how it was sliced off and how it was tanned, and the direction of the grain and where it was cut from. I mean, there's so many factors that go into determining the stretch that you'll never know how a piece is going to stretch. So there we go. All of that is pretty good. Now I can take it off, but I don't need to do my next step. My next step is I'm going to make a slip sole, which is simply filling this little gap with some scrap leather. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to find some scraps, and I'm going to do it. All right, so to make the slip sole, the easiest way that I know is just take an ordinary piece of paper and use your thumbnail to follow the edge of the leather and figure out where it is. And you follow it, you follow it. Probably the most custom pattern you'll ever make, and you only use it once and you throw it away when you're done. But it does really work. So that is the pattern. So I can use a marker to just do that, and that'll allow me to cut out a pattern. Lay this pattern out. I'll double test it, double check it, I mean, to make sure that it fits. And the nice part about it is if you don't fill every last nook and cranny, that's okay. And there's other things you can do. You could do it with chopped cork, which has been spread with, oh, I totally screwed it up. I made a pattern. I don't know what I made a pattern of. It's not even close. So I'm going to do it the other way. The way I often do it is I just take a piece of leather that looks like it's going to fit for part of it, and I glue it in, kind of going, well, yep. Cut off whatever is unnecessary, and I can make this up out of tiny little scraps. This is going to fit in here. There we go. And that'll fill up that portion. And then we need a strip to fill in the back portion. And that could be something like this. By doing it this way, you use up just absolute trash leather. The stuff you can't use for anything else. So I can just kind of fill it in with that in that way. Pretty good. And that'll do. So I just go, a little bit of glue. Do that. And for this, a little different from what I said, I'm just gonna fill it in. Even though it's wet, it's pretty close, and it'll do a pretty good job of filling the space. And if I want, I can fill it with even more little scraps of leather. If you want, you can do a lot with filling. Now, I would say that's in pretty good shape. At this point, you're basically done. I'm going to put a little tiny chunk in the tip there. Something like that. Maybe trim a little more off. That is good enough. All right, next step. Okay, now I gotta make the sole. All right, so the next step is to put the sole on. Here there's some decisions to be made. I've cut out some soles. These are relatively soft because these are going to have some different kind of treatments done to them. But basically this will be a completed shoe in a few minutes. If I glue it on here, I have to be confident that I can get it off of the wooden form with the rigidity of this sole. Because this leather is relatively soft, I'm going to go ahead and do this because it'll give me the best chance of getting everything straight. If I was working with material that is much more stiff, or I was working with a boot that was much more tight, then I absolutely wouldn't do this, and I would do this at the next step. I'll talk about that when I get to the next step. But right now, what I'm going to do is glue. So glue is the key for a lot of this stuff. Once again, barge cement is your friend. And you want to put it on in a way that coats all the surfaces, but it does not leave a huge, thick, gloopy residue. Okay, then I do the same thing to the soles. I have to make sure I get the right sole, not the left sole, or the left sole, not the right sole. Which foot am I doing? I'm doing the left. I have to make sure I get the left sole. Once again, put the glue on. And trying to get it evenly distributed, but not a thick coating. This glue sticks really well to itself, but if it's too thick, it really doesn't dry very well. Scientifically speaking, this type of glue has a greater cohesion than adhesion. That is to say, it sticks to itself better than it sticks to other things. It sticks to leather very well because it has a thinner in it that really allows the leather to get down into the fibers. And so we want to allow the fact that its cohesion, its ability to stick to itself, stick together, is better than its adhesion. It works really, really well for this. Okay, at this point, we just need to let it dry. So what I'm going to do is, actually I've decided I'm going to show you this next step at the other one, since I could stick it together and peel it off here, but I'll just show you peeling it off because, of course, that's not a special thing. You just have to grab it and pull. Well, I say it's not difficult. Well, this one's proving difficult. You just got to pull and get it to come off. There was a little tiny bit of glue stuck to it. So, at this point, you could actually wear this as a boot. Of course, it's got sticky stuff on the bottom. But right now, what we're going to do, we're going to walk over to the iron last, and we're going to work on it over there. At the next step, I'm going to take an iron last. I'm going to put it onto there. And then I'm going to use shoe tacks. These are from DB Gurney and Company. These are either 1.5 or 2 ounce. That's what they're called, 1.5 ounce hand shoe tacks. And they're specifically made for doing this kind of work. I'm probably going to use number 2 ounce, or 1.5. I'll see which feels right. So what I want to do is try to get the toe at exactly the right place, get the heel at exactly the right place, and then just kind of press it around, allowing the iron last inside to flow inside, And it seems to be good. Now at this point, pretty well stuck down. Okay, so now take my nails. And it really doesn't matter where you start. But you have to be sure that you're on top of the iron last. I tend to start at the seams. I don't know why. It's just what I do. And I tap it in. And this nail, when it hits the iron last, it turns back on itself. I can stick my finger in here and I can't feel it because that means it's doing what it's supposed to do. So I'm going to take another one here, put it on the other seam. This is just a light hammer, and that's all you have to do. Okay, so those are both 2 ounce. I'm going to work for some 1.5s now. See how they go. See what feels right. Okay. So now I'm going back. 1.5 feels good. How I feel it is I look at the point I meet resistance. I'm looking at how much head is sticking up above. And in this point, I've got about 1/8 of an inch. That's ideal. Oops. And how far am I spacing them? However far they need to be. This particular one, this sort of 3 to an inch, to 1/2 inch maybe, 1/3 of an inch spacing seems to be okay. I will certainly space it more closely around the toe and around the heel. In some of the more open parts, they don't need to be done that way, that tightly. Now, right back here where I have all this stuff that's a little thicker, I'm going to go back to a slightly bigger nail because I've got a lot more thickness. See how that goes. Should be good. Once again, more art than science. Just kind of feel it. Whatever feels right. I would say in the hundreds and hundreds of pairs of boots and shoes that I've made, 1.5 to 2 ounce is what I use for most of this style of construction. I've used some 1 ounce occasionally when they're really thin. And I've used some 3s when I'm doing stuff that's a lot thicker. But that's about it. 1.5 to 2 ounce seems to be a pretty good size. And these are just simple shoes. We're not doing anything fancy. And that seems to work okay. We're also going for a fairly crude look. You know, we didn't spend a lot of time dressing the edges and making everything just be perfect. We're making rough and ready boots. I'm not sure how long this video is going to be. I think I'm going to be around 40 minutes total for this one.
We're at 40 right now.
I have 40 right now. Okay, so 45 minutes, which is about what it takes me to do a boot on day 2. So I always figure I need a couple hours on day 1 and a couple hours on day 2, and I will have a pair of boots. You notice that one came up. There's a weird flaw in my iron last where there's a seam, and I just happened to pound that first one right into that seam. So I fixed it. I can work faster if I'm not talking as well. So, you know, hey. I don't have to stop and think about what I'm doing. I can do it more quickly. But hey, it's all in the name of science or YouTube or whatever. Started making shoes in 1982, 83, no, 84. So I've been making shoes for a long time. And the first ones I made were really atrocious. I would call them foot bags. Nothing that has any nice shape. But in those couple of years, I've learned to do some things differently. And I also have learned to do some things in some different historical patterns. This is not necessarily a medieval way of constructing shoes, but it's a very effective way of constructing shoes when you don't have a million tools. And it works really well for cosplay shoes. They should be really good. For this next step after this, we're going to glue on some rubber, but it's just going to be glued, maybe a few tacks. But that's really how modern shoes are made. They're made out of modern materials, and they're all held together almost entirely with glue. So the barge cement that we used really is enough. I personally, though, like a mechanical connection holding all of my pieces together. So these clinch nails really do that. About half a dozen more nails. And this shoe will be ready. Okay, I'm getting to that weird glitch in my last, so I moved it back a little bit to be on the back side of that. 2 more nails. And the last nail is going to be another number 2.
You had a number 2 on each side, not one there.
I have a number 2 here, a number 2 here, and number 2 here. This leather just feels a little thicker, so that's what I'm going with. I've noticed that this number 2 just pulled up. Of course, the very last nail, or first nail, is going to be uncooperative. So let's get it out of there. We don't want it. Yeah, I can see it. I must not have been going in straight when I hammered it. I thought it felt a little funny. So I pull it out, and I'm not going to reuse the same hole. If I reuse the same hole, it will follow the same path. So I'm going to go right next to it, endeavor to be as straight as possible. Oh, see, I just bent. We'll see. All right, now I put my hand in, and I feel for nails that are sticking out. Those would be ones where I'd missed the edges. And I cannot find a single nail. Everything is smooth. Everything is nice. So, unroll it, and this is a finished boot. There we go. Hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching. Happy shoemaking.